was about 12, 13 years old. I think the alcohol was a gateway for me. That's why I probably ended up using crack and heroin, that's when my life really hit rock bottom.
Shoplift all day and use drugs all day and not sleep much. It's the same routine over and over and over. And I overdosed and my heart gave up 3 times.
Stealing, selling and scoring to get more drugs, constantly. I just commit crime after crime after crime after crime.
From drugs to crime to prison and back again. It's the cycle that hurts addicts, tears apart their families and blights communities like this. Erdington in Birmingham is where Paul, Darren and Lee would steal every day to fund their habits, and where one police officer is trying a different approach to tackle the problem.
This high street is a typical high street. A typical prolific retail offender will just sort of start at one end and just make their way down. Get enough money to buy drugs, so they'll then stop, find a drug dealer, use the drugs, and off they go again. If they use like £100, for example, of drugs a day, they would have to probably steal £300 worth of stock from retailers.
PC Stuart Toogood has been a neighbourhood police officer for 5 years.
I came to Erdington, and to be honest with you, I was quite shocked at the amount of offenders out there day to day doing lots of retail crime, and the commonality was heroin and crack use. It was particularly noticeable around this area, and it was the same old people. Prison does work for some, but it doesn't work for a lot, and certainly where entrenched heroin and crack cocaine addicts are concerned, who commit a lot of theft and go to prison, they come out 9 times out of 10 and they will use drugs on that same day.
Between them, Paul, Lee and Darren have served more than 60 prison sentences for hundreds of drug-related offences, mostly carried out here in Erdington. Addiction services in the community hadn't worked for them, but none had ever tried long-term residential rehab at treatment centres like Livingston House.
How you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you. How long have you been in now?
Residents follow the Narcotics Anonymous 12-step programme. They take part in therapy sessions and live together as a community.
The members of this group share the same problems.
With funding from the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner and contributions from retailers, PC Toogood could fund places for addicts. The Offender to Rehab programme was born.
It's normally a staff-led group in the mornings, and then in the afternoon it's a 12-step group.
Paul was 8 months into treatment when we first met in January 2020.
I've been getting the funding. The first time I went to prison I was 15, yeah. It was for burglary. I've been locked up for robbery as well. That happened a few years later. But mainly in my addiction, like with heroin and crack, it was mainly shoplifting. At first, for a good few years, it'd be I'd get to prison, I'd sit there feeling sorry for myself, thinking, oh, what have I done, all that. And then when I get out, things have got to change, and then I'd come out and before I know it, I'd be schooling straight away, even though I had them intentions before. I wanted to change for a long time, but I just didn't have that push in myself. And 5 years ago, I lost a friend in front of me that died from heroin overdose. Died in front of me, and I knew from then I needed to make a change. And but the hold it had on me was that strong. I just struggled to find a way, And yeah, I went back to prison, came back out again, and. Then I bumped into Stuart Toogood.
He was a problem, and it was actually my inspector at the time that said, we need to sort out Paul. So that's why we targeted him. And he didn't want to know at first. He was very anti-police. He wasn't nasty, but he was very aware of what people might think of him. Called him a grass and this and that. But I assured him that all we were bothered about was him. That's all we wanted to do, was just make him well.
The recent independent drug review conducted for the government found that long-term drug users are cycling in and out of prisons at great expense but rarely achieving recovery. On a given day, nearly 1 in 4 prisoners, that's 20,000 people, are serving sentences for drug-related offences like theft.
The review found while treatment is available in jail, it is generally limited to stabilising prisoners and not aiming to achieve longer-term recovery. PC Toogood arranged for me to meet Lee on Erdington High Street, outside the shops he used to steal from.
I'd buy drugs like probably 5 times a day, so I was using quite a lot of bags of heroin. I'd say probably on average about 15 bags of heroin a day.
He had just left Livingston House and the offender to rehab programme. Unusually, he had taken up hard drugs later in life.
Basically, I had my 3 children. And then when I had my 4th, I lost my little boy to cot death. And my kids actually went into care. And that's when it sort of started. Started using drugs to block everything out, just trying to take the pain away. And it seemed to work at one stage. So just try and block everything out. It's like putting a mask on and blocking everything out. I had to hit my rock bottom. I was on the streets, sleeping in doorways and stuff. And it just got to the point where, you know, I was doing anything.
How are you feeling about the future?
I'm actually excited. It's actually nice to wake up in the morning feeling normal, you know. But I'm really excited, I'm looking forward to it. I've got my own place now with my partner, who's been really supportive, and my mum. And the rest of my family. I've got them all back in my life because I did lose them. Apart from my mum, she stuck by me through thick and thin. It's the best feeling ever, to be honest. And getting the opportunity to go to rehab saved my life. 100% saved my life.
Following in Lee's footsteps was his friend Darren, just behind him in his treatment journey and feeling hopeful.
I started my family. I stole from everywhere. I did. I stole from all my whole community. I stole from shops, from warehouses, from factories, houses, and all that stuff to feed my drug habit.
So it was quite immediate, was it? You'd go out, steal something,
sell
it, and then buy drugs.
Yes. Just that's all it was. Every single day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days. Yeah, it was exhausting.
I first met Darren on the high street, just patrolling, and he'd be up to his usual tricks in and out of shops. He was always wanted, so I was always chasing him, and he was always, you know, we always laughed that, you know, I was always running after him and he'd get away most of the time, you know. We got what we call a community behaviour order against Darren to prevent him from coming onto the high street. And I always remember being at court, the magistrate's court, with him on the morning, applying for, whilst he was being sentenced for a theft that he committed, applying for this community behaviour order. And I said to him, do you want help? And he said, yes, I want help.
Some people who see a drug user who's shoplifting all the time would say, send to prison. Prison sentences, send to prison. Yeah. Having been through that, why is it that prison doesn't work?
Nothing happens, and that's my truth. Nothing happens. You just sit in a cell, watch TV, drink tea, and then you get released. So you get released the same, but you put a little bit of weight on, but none of this has been fixed. Basic things, you know, living skills, basic living skills. Didn't know none of that. Today, me sitting here, I'm having a conversation. I'm looking people in the eye. Do you know the basic things in life where you can just be normal around people and just be at peace? You know, this has done wonders for me.
But a month later, I caught up with Darren. He'd relapsed.
Hi, Darren, how are you?
I'm alright, thank you.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to meet you. Come in.
Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm okay. I landed up in a really, really, really dark place. I landed up in town, I landed up like homeless people, I landed up in a car park on my own.
What did you take?
I took heroin and crack. Yeah. which is not a good idea. Not with myself anyway. Put me back straight in my pain, instantly, just like that. And they do say this is a lifelong process. So me thinking that 6.5 months was long enough for anyone. No. This is the rest of my life. I'm going to have to work on this stuff for the rest of my life.
Darren was determined to get back on track. He was offered the chance to return to rehab, so I arranged to visit him when he was settled. But then the first lockdown was announced and our filming had to stop.
Hello everyone, my name's Paul.
Paul offered to make a video diary.
Yeah, 2 months into lockdown now. Found the situation tricky, but also took a lot of positives from it, even though it's a terrible thing what's happening in the world at the minute, and a lot of people have lost their lives, which is really sad. But personally, for my recovery, it's been going all right. You know, a couple of things have happened the last few days. It's really niggled me. You know, two of my friends that I came through treatment with, you know, they've relapsed, and it's really got to me. I hope you all had a good Christmas. Well, I've had a tricky few months. Yeah, it's been really tricky for me. Ended up relapsing 4 months ago. Ended up picking up alcohol. Yeah, had to go back into treatment for 3 months, which I'm very lucky for and grateful at the same time.
It was February 2021 before I could see Paul again in person. With COVID testing finally allowing visitors into the rehab centre, I found him well after his blip, now living independently.
I don't go back to my drug of choice, like it's been heroin and crack. I've been clean of that like for 18 months, nearly 18 months now. But I must have had a little reservation around alcohol, you know, and ended up doing that. But like I say, it's just lucky that I got good friends around me that brought me back. But I'm all right at the minute. I'm doing all right. Doing my voluntary work again. Helping out in the kitchen today, in fact, which I don't mind.
Darren had seized his second chance to get clean and was thriving as a support worker at Livingston House and studying at college.
To look back from where I was to where I am today, complete turnaround. With COVID and stuff, not being able to see people and, you know, family members and stuff like that, yeah. It's worked well for me in one way, because, you know, I'm doing a bit of college stuff and it's kind of kept me grounded, it's kept me kind of in the house and stuff like that, so that's been a good thing.
Fewer distractions?
Fewer distractions, yeah, definitely fewer distractions.
But Lee's journey had taken a different turn.
We didn't perhaps have the outcome we really desired for Lee. We were starting to see some real good progress. He wasn't using drugs anymore and he wasn't committing crime anymore, so that was a great thing for us. But then the pandemic happened, it took us all by surprise. He got furloughed, he started to drink, he couldn't use the gym anymore and all those things he was doing, he couldn't go to work obviously, and his depression started to come back, and his drinking led to him doing a silly thing, and he ended up back in prison. But I'm pretty confident that when he's released from prison, he will not come out and buy drugs or use drugs, and he will not be sleeping on the streets, he will not be at risk of overdosing and dying, he will not be committing retail crime, and actually that is a good thing.
A new survey by the Association of Convenience Stores, shared with 5 News, recorded 1.1 million incidents of shoplifting in the last year. 63% were carried out by repeat offenders. Drug addiction was the most common reason behind it. West Midlands Police say the Offender to Rehab programme has prevented £2 million worth of retail crime in the last 3 years and kept £800,000 out of the drugs economy.
There will be, I'm sure, people watching our programme who will see clips of these three men talking about this cycle of crime and drugs, who will not feel sympathetic towards them, who will think that they just need to go to prison and be taken out of society. Do you understand that?
I do understand it and I get it, and I think it's an important point, because behind every crime is a victim, and especially when you're talking about retail crime, there's rising incidents of threats and violence towards staff, and that's something really important. We should never lose sight of that, but that's why we're doing what we're doing. You know, we're trying to safeguard retail staff by actually picking these people up and trying the rehab approach with them, because if we can get them well, then they're not offending, then they're not potentially cause any risk to staff. And you know, just sending them to the prison, of course they come out and they just start again, so it doesn't stop the problem.
This month, PC Toogood visited Paul, Darren and two other men on the programme for the first time since the pandemic. The reunion was special to witness.
Every step of the way, every single step, never gave up on me. Every time when I've relapsed and I've gone back out there, within an instant, the next morning, you're there. You can ring, you're there.
I can always see that there is a good person there. Do you know what I mean? But it's, you take the drugs away, you've got a really nice person, and you're all testament to that.
Of the 33 men and women PC Toogood has helped into rehab, 14 are currently clean and not reoffending. A good success rate, he says, for a problem that has no easy solution. He hopes others follow his lead in trying a different way to break Britain's drug cycle.
Well, we wanted to ask those in charge why more isn't being done at a national level to break the cycle of reoffending. Earlier today, I spoke to the Minister for Crime and Policing, Kit Malthouse, and I started by asking him whether he would commit to investing more in longer-term drug rehabilitation.
So you're absolutely right that we do believe that rehab has a strong role to play in reducing reoffending and in helping people get their lives back in shape. And that's why we've just recently announced, the biggest uplift in rehabilitation spending for 15 years, another £80 million. It's going to be focused on making sure that anybody who leaves prison, who needs those rehabilitation service, gets it. But critically also, you might have seen we're putting together these ADDA projects in 6 locations across England and Wales, where crucially we're bringing together all the local services that can support those individuals, particularly focused on drugs, to first of all use the police to kind of clear away as much of the drug dealing as we possibly can, so that those support services, health, local authorities, housing and others can get in and really help these people to confront the problems that they've got with substances and get them back into a life of truth and light.
The fact is, at the moment, there's approximately £600 million a year spent on drug treatment. How much more do you think needs to be spent in order for it to be effective?
Well, what I'm trying to do in this approach, these ADDA projects, as I say, in places like Blackpool and Hastings and Norwich, is to create the idea of a sort of investable model where some of these really stubborn numbers around drug misuse and sadly drug deaths can be shown to have moved because of this coordinated effort. And if I can show it on a focused basis that way, then I'm able to take that model and reproduce it elsewhere in the country. And I've got a proposition which I can sell, if you like, into my Treasury colleagues for further investment. As I say, we've had the largest increase in rehabilitation funding for 15 years. That's an enormous opportunity for us to prove what can be done and to sell that, if you like, into the people who pay the bills.
This does, though, come off the back of years of cuts, treatment services curtailed by local government funding cuts. There are many out there who work in drug treatment services who say there has been a lack of investment for years and there really needs to be a bigger focus on this.
So I agree that there needs to be a much bigger focus. And I totally buy that drug sits at the heart of so much crime, but also so many social problems that we see out there. And that's why I was so keen for us to put in place a kind of twin track strategy. First of all, really assertive work on supply. We're knocking out county lines on a daily basis now, 550 in the last year alone. big significant investment in reducing the amount of drugs in the system, but at the same time investing in those rehab services which you're helpfully illustrating in your report, which can turn people around for the long term. Policing will get us so far, but at the same time, we do need to do that long-term therapeutic work with those people who cycle in and out of prison, making their lives a misery and indeed making our lives a misery by their persistent acquisitive crime in particular. We need to do something to get them off that merry-go-round. And I'm very hopeful that this big investment in rehab, as I say, everybody who leaves prison who needs a rehab place will get one, that will give us the chance to break that cycle once and for all.
Kit Malthouse, Crime and Policing Minister, talking to me earlier. I'm joined now by Professor Dame Carol Black, who will soon be publishing phase 2 of an independent review into drugs for the government, and Caroline Best, who is a recovering addict, clean for 2.5 years, and who went through the rehab programme featured in our film. Thank you both for joining us here tonight. Dame Carol Black, if I could ask you first. Kit Malthouse pledges £80 million and says everybody who leaves prison who needs a rehab place will get one. Is that enough money, and are there enough rehab places?
Well, first of all, there are not enough rehab places, and year on year as we move forward, we will need more money because, as you rightly said, there's been disinvestment for about 10 years, and we've got to start building the service back up. We can't do it in 1 year. It's going to take several years for us to get back to a good number of rehab places, for treatment places, and for recovery. But I think we're at a good point when we can start this journey. That 80 million is the first investment we've had, as you said, for 15 years. So I think the mood and the time is right. And I hope with my second report, in which there are very, I think, good recommendations about how we might do this and how it might be sustainable, will really take us even further.
That sounds really hopeful. Caroline, if I could turn to you, what was it about rehab that worked for you where other interventions just hadn't?
So it was looking at myself as the problem and not just kind of, getting me off the drugs or substituting it. It was that looking at myself and, getting an understanding of addiction, and that it's not just about the drugs.
Were there points in your darkest hours where you didn't think it was possible to come out of it, to lead the kind of life you're leading now?
I'd kind of resigned myself that I was going to die using addict. I didn't think that I'd ever come back from where I was.
Dame Carol Black, I'm interested to see that PC Stuart Toogood's programme, he says 40% of the 33 people he's helped so far are now clean and not reoffending, and he calls that a really good success. Some people might really hope that he could help even more people. Do you see that as success?
I do see that as success. This is a hugely complex problem. And if you think of any other chronic condition, and could I say, I do think addiction is a health condition. I do think there will be relapses, as we have seen in the film, and therefore you won't be able to help everyone. But I think he's done remarkably well. And if we could do as well as that, we would reduce violent crime, we would reduce deaths on our streets from overdoses, and we would have more people living meaningful lives. So many people addicted to drugs said to me, they felt they wanted a purpose in life. And really, when you're deeply addicted, that is almost impossible to have. And you need to be able to get good rehabilitation, good treatment, and good recovery. I think for many people, this is possible.
Caroline, I know you were one of the first people to be on PC Toogood's Offender to Rehab programme. Do you see other people in the local community now who are addicts as you were, now looking to see what you've achieved and what the others have achieved and seeking to emulate that?
So where I come from, people don't kind of engage with the police. They have barriers. But since I got clean through the Offender to Rehab programme, a lot of people in my area that are in the situation that I was in are reaching out.
And I know West Midlands Police are putting more officers into the programme in other areas in the West Midlands. Do you think it's something that should be widened out throughout the country?
Most definitely. You know, it's worked for me and many other people. Why can't it work for others?
Dame Carol Black, do we need to change our mindset when it comes to looking at addicts who are also criminals?
We definitely need to change our mindset. I think, as the Minister said, he really indicated in a way that many of these individuals are not bad people. They're very sad people who've had really probably pretty traumatic experiences early in their lives. They get into this really hamster wheel of in and out of prison, and you've got to find somewhere to try and break that cycle. And so if we can break it either at the point when they might go to prison for 2 or 3 months, could we really divert them into good treatment and good recovery? Or can we break that cycle when they're coming out of prison and ensure that they go straight into treatment and recovery rather than just taking the next shot of heroin and back on the cycle that will take them back into prison? Many of these individuals have been in prison 20, 25 times.
Professor Dame Carol Black, I'm afraid we've run out of time. I'll have to stop you there, but thank you both so much for joining us. That's all we have time for now. You can hear more from Dame Carol Black in our podcast, and you can find that and much more on our Twitter page. Search for 5 News. But thank you to all our contributors, to Paul, Darren, Lee, and of course, PC Stuart Toogood. And thank you for watching. Take care and good night.